The greatest gladiator match in the history of the world. Titan versus Titan. Humongous ape versus giant lizard. Godzilla versus Kong. Hey there, Popcorn Squad! One of the biggest rivalries in the movie history is coming to the big screen and small screen in Warner Brothers and Legendary Pictures' new monster showdown, Godzilla vs. Kong, releasing in theaters and HBO Max on March 31st. Godzilla and Kong are two of the most iconic movie monsters and have been in over 45 movies combined. Godzilla hails from Japan, making his first big screen appearance in 1954, while Kong was American-made, making his debut in 1933. So to say that this monster brawl is long overdue would be the understatement of the century. Thankfully, Legendary Pictures have put their very best foot forward and have created a cinematic universe appropriately titled the Monsterverse, with these two titans as the frontmen. This will be the fourth entry in the Legendary Pictures Monsterverse that includes 2014's reboot of Godzilla, 2017's Kong Skull Island, and 2019's sequel to Godzilla, Godzilla King of the Monsters. This film will also mark the first time that Godzilla and Kong will grace the big screen together since 1962. And as fun as that original movie can be, we all know how that turned out. Now, for those of you that aren't huge monster fans and haven't seen the other three entries in the Monsterverse, but are eager to see the cinematic showdown, we've got you covered with everything you need to know before watching Godzilla vs. Kong. Let's start in the beginning. Our Monsterverse opens in 1944 during World War II, where an American fighter pilot named Hank Marlowe crash lands on the beach of an uncharted island in the South Pacific. He's closely followed by a Japanese fighter pilot whose name I dare not pronounce. The two were clearly in a dogfight and continue their match on land in close combat. Things are starting to get pretty intense, like samurai sword intense, when out of nowhere, a humongous ape shows up and interrupts the fight. Fast forward to 1973. A nearly bankrupt US government organization called Monarch desperately tries to get clearance for an expedition to a recently discovered uncharted island, popularly dubbed Skull Island. Let's talk about Monarch for a second, because they are one of the central pieces of the Monsterverse. Monarch was founded in secrecy in 1946 as a joint coalition between several governments in order to hunt and study massive unidentified terrestrial organisms, or MUTOs. Hence the expedition to Skull Island. During said expedition, Monarch was headed by Bill Randa. Randa and his seismologist Houston Brooks believe that there are primeval creatures residing on the island and have plans to study them. More on him later. Monarch reluctantly gets the go-ahead and go on to recruit Loki. I'm sorry, I meant Captain James Conrad, to track the monsters, who they pay handsomely. Conrad, not the monsters. Monsters don't make money or spend it. They also recruit anti-war photographer Carol Danvers. Sorry, Mason Weaver. And of course, they couldn't venture to an uncharted island that may or may not have prehistoric monsters on it without the involvement of the US Army, led by Lieutenant Colonel Nick Fury. Gosh, no! Preston Packard, Monarch & Co. make it to Skull Island and begin to drop seismic explosives all over the island to map out the island and prove Brooks' Hollow Earth theory. More on that later. The crew gets ambushed by the humongous ape that we encountered in 1944 and ends up scattered across the island and split into two groups, one with Conrad Weaver and the other with Rhonda and the rest. Conrad's group encounters the local Iwi natives on the island, and to our surprise, Hank Marlowe, just much older than we last saw him, and a craving for a
hot dog and a beer at Wrigley Field on opening day.
He tells Conrad and crew that the 100-foot ape that they encountered is named Kong, and he protects the island and the Iwi from predators, especially a race of subterranean reptilian creatures that he calls
skull crawlers.
The skull crawlers are apparently responsible for the extinction of Kong's species, leaving him to be the last of his kind. Giant apes, I assume, is what they're called. Conrad's group creates a makeshift boat out of Marlowe's crashed fighter plane and finally regroup with the other survivors of the Monarch mission. After a few encounters with some other monsters, a run-in with the skull crawlers, which brings Rhonda to his end, a colorful battle where Conrad goes full samurai on some seriously bloodthirsty birds, and a final standoff between Kong and the head honcho Skullcrawler. The survivors make it off the island, and Kong stands victorious as King of Skull Island. Later, Marlo gets to reunite with his family and finally enjoys a hot dog and beer while watching a game played at Wrigley Field. As for Conrad and Weaver, they're detained in a Monarch facility where Houston Brooks and San Lin, biologists working for Monarch who was a part of the survivors from the Skull Island mission, more on her later, tell them that Kong is not the only monster on Earth and show images of cave paintings depicting reptilian giants, a three-headed dragon, and a giant moth. Jumping ahead to 1999, Monarch seems to be thriving and sends scientist Ishiro Serizawa and Vivian Graham to a collapsed mine in the Philippines to investigate the skeleton of a giant monster. They also discover 2 giant spores, one of which they deem dormant, the other hatched. A trail of something rather large that came out of said spore is found leading directly into the ocean. Not far in Janjiro, Japan, a nuclear power plant experiences some rather unusual seismic activity. Senior Supervisor Joe Brody, who apparently doesn't have a great relationship with his son Ford, sends in his technician wife to check out the reactor and see if there's anything wrong. Well, the reactor explodes, and in order to prevent more collateral damage, Brody is forced to trap his wife inside of the reactor and watch her die as the plant collapses. This all happens on Joe's birthday. 15 years later, an eager and obsessed Joe Brody breaks into the quarantined city of Janjira to find out what happened to his wife. He gets caught in his son Pietro. Dang it. Sorry. Ford, now a Navy EOD officer who is married to Wanda Maximoff. God! Oh, his wife is Al. Ford leaves his family and heads to Japan to bail his father out, but ends up heading back into the nuclear city with his father because his father believes that there's a cover-up going on and that
something killed my wife, and I have a right to know!
He's not wrong though. They get caught and are taken to a Monarch facility in the center of Janjira, which isn't full of radiation anymore, by the way, and find that they've been housing a giant chrysalis that feeds off of radiation. The chrysalis hatches. A massive unidentified terrestrial organism, or Muto, emerges and flees, killing Joe in his wake. You were robbed, Bryan Cranston. Robbed! Through really convenient circumstances, Ford joins the task force, or whatever, to track down the Muto that ends up going to Honolulu and starts doing typical monster stuff. While another monster gets a hold of the radiation and comes out of hiding to fight. The monster that shows up? Godzilla! And he's ready to throw hands. All the monsters converge in San Francisco, where the US Army plans to destroy them all, except Serizawa, who thinks that we should
Let them fight.
The monsters fight, wreck San Francisco, and Godzilla destroys the Mutos. Ford, after a long night pointlessly fighting amongst the monsters, reunites with his family. The world thinks Godzilla died, but instead, he gets up and walks out like a boss. 5 years after the existence of the Titans is revealed to the world, Dr. Emma Russell, works for Monarch, and her daughter Madison are living in China at Monarch Outpost 61, one of many around the world that are homes to dormant Titans. They witness the birth of Mothra. Emma calms Mothra using the Orca, a device that can emit frequencies to attract or alter Titan behavior. A group of eco-terrorists led by former British Army Colonel Alan Jonah attacks the base and kidnaps Emma and Madison. Dr. Serizawa and Graham approach Emma's former husband to help them track down the terrorists, Emma and Madison. So they follow Godzilla to Antarctica, where another Monarch outpost is home to a 3-headed Titan codenamed Monster Zero. We learn there that Emma is actually working with the terrorists and intends to release Monster Zero to heal the world from the horrible damages that humans have caused for centuries. Monster Zero awakens wrecking shop and kills Dr. Graham. Godzilla, out of the blue, shows up and begins to fight Monster Zero in one of the craziest looking monster fights ever. Emma uses the Orca to control Monster Zero and awakens the other dormant monsters around the world with his alpha cry. Listen, there's a lot of monster action in this movie, and in short, a Titan named Rodan wakes up in Mexico, who then teams up with Monster Zero, who we learn is actually an alien that is named King Ghidorah, seeking to terraform the Earth.
That's comforting.
In a fight, Godzilla ends up low-key dying and retreats to his lair in order to recharge his nuclear self. Serizawa and co. realize that Ghidorah is gonna literally end the world, and they need Godzilla to show back up so they can
Let them fight.
Monarch ends up going down to this lair, which proves Dr. Brooks' Hollow Earth theory. Remember him? Speaking of Dr. Brooks, he's back in China studying Mothra with Dr. Ling, who is the twin sister of Dr. Eileen Chen. They both are actually the descendants of San Lin, who we last saw in Kong Skull Island with Dr. Brooks. So Serizawa supercharges Godzilla by detonating a nuclear bomb and sacrificing himself just before he gets his moment to touch the ancient titan. So the humans and monsters all converge in an evacuated Boston. Emma slowly realizes that her plan is whack after her daughter Madison disowns her. We also learned at the beginning of this movie that Emma and Mark, her ex, lost their son during the events of San Francisco. Madison steals the Orca and heads to Fenway Park and activates the Orca, broadcasting a frequency that calms the Titans, but inadvertently attracts all of them, wreaking havoc across the world. Mark leads a team to go rescue his daughter from the park because the monsters are fighting in the city and are obviously moving toward the Orca, where, you guessed it, Madison is. During the Titan fight, Mothra sacrifices herself to give energy to Godzilla. Emma sacrifices herself to give Godzilla time to recoup from the fight, and in turn, he reaches an all-new empowered state. Basically, he goes Super Saiyan and destroys Ghidorah. He kills the three-headed Titan and eats his last head for breakfast, because it's the morning by this time. Eventually, all of the other Titans show up and look at Godzilla as the alpha, and bow to him, making Godzilla the king of the monsters. We later find out that Titans are helping heal the planet. It seems that a second Mothra egg has been discovered, and that certain Titans are converging from Skull Island. Also, Jonah, the terrorist that Emma was working with, has discovered that one of Ghidorah's severed heads is in Mexico, and he obviously has a bad guy kind of plan for it. Which leads us to Godzilla vs. Kong. It seems from the trailer that Monarch has in fact captured Kong and is using him to protect the world against what they feel is an attack from Godzilla. Millie Bobby Brown returns to star as Madison, who is a bit skeptical about Godzilla's attack on people. I believe that there is another, larger foe who is behind it all, and that Godzilla and Kong at one point in the film will learn that both their moms are named Mothra.
Why did you say that name?
And then team up to defeat the bigger villain. However, director Adam Wingard has stated that the movie will definitely give us one clear winner. We have our theories on who this enemy might be, and if you watch the trailer close enough, you may just see who we're talking about. Just remember that large skeleton of a dead Godzilla in the Philippines, okay? That's all I'm gonna say about that. So there you have it! You are now ready to fully immerse yourself in this monster showdown. How are you going to be watching the film? In theaters? On HBO Max? And who do you think is going to win? Godzilla or Kong? Whatever the case may be, make sure you stay tuned and check into our channel for our reaction to the movie. Make sure to like, share this video with someone you know, and subscribe today.